This has been particularly effective on divided issues where CARICOM 14 votes are earnestly sought by other countries. And it also went on to suggest that the banking de-risking challenge was an issue where collective action by all member states is likely to be far more effective than battling separately. But we live in a world, Mr. Speaker, where national objectives can flavor foreign policy decisions. Countries are seduced by offers of bilateral aid, a phenomenon known as dollar diplomacy, but which in the report was colorfully described as eat-a-food diplomacy. Countries can be threatened by others, subtly or even more overtly, and this is where some member states run for cover instead of circling the wagons. Many of our member states have and are practicing eat-a-food diplomacy, and unfortunately, this has resulted in the approach CARICOM has taken in recent times in relation to its fragmented foreign engagement. What all of this demonstrates, Mr. Speaker, is that as a united force, whilst we might not be invincible, we can wield some amount of power. Our respective governments will have to come to the table to be more prepared to decide that expediency will not pay in the long run. Finally, Mr. Speaker, CARICOM has an important role to play in the development of the people and the states in the Caribbean. It cannot afford to fail. Were that to happen, history would judge us harshly. But no one can help but wonder aloud, Mr. Speaker, because the West Indian Commission report, Time for Action report, was presented in 1992. Not much was done in terms of its recommendations. We have another report before us. As Sir Shidras Rampal sadly said, and I quote him, "We have crept through the fractured promises of the Treaty of Chagaramas and the Declaration of Granance, and through innumerable pious declarations, affirmations, and commitments, the roll call of unfulfilled pledges and promises, and unimplemented decision is staggering and shameful," unquote. This report, Mr. Speaker, this CARICOM report, chaired by former Prime Minister, comes 26 years down the road. Will it also share a similar fate? Let that not happen. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank members for their participation in the debate. I've heard the comments of members, and I can say that members feel truly fulfilled in having the opportunity to make their contribution, make their comments, indeed criticisms, but to participate in something that could be historic, indeed could change the trajectory of a regional organization. Mr. Speaker, let me respond to a few issues raised. The first issue is the length of time it took to bring the report to Parliament. Just for the record, Mr. Speaker, once the report was completed, the Cabinet received the report and deputed the IRTC, the International Relations and Trade Committee of Cabinet to review it. That took some time. In fact, the Ministry of Finance commented on it, MICAF commented on it, and other ministries, and of course the Attorney General, not to mention the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, had various comments. It took some time for the Cabinet to come to a conclusive position as to what recommendations we would accept and what we would not accept. Once that was done, then we laid it on the table of the House in February, which we thought would have been enough time for members of the House to, as a group, as a party, as individuals, to review it. And I thought that it would be the appropriate time, just before going into the taking over the chairmanship and hosting the heads here at the CARICOM Heads of Government Conference, that we have the debate at this time. So it is perfect timing, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, what it does is to take advantage of the currency of the issue. It is now on the minds of all Jamaicans that next month we will be hosting all the heads of CARICOM here. And so there is the momentum and the attention to the issue. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, CARICOM is not an academic abstract. You know, Mr. Speaker, CARICOM means something to the people. And if we don't make it relevant, we could lose the regional integration by virtue of the people saying this does not make sense. This does not mean anything to us. And that, to me, Mr. Speaker, is the greatest fear. If we, at this level, do not act to make the institutions relevant in your constituency, when you get on your street corner, or you talk to your farmer, or you go to the hotel in your constituency, and they say to you, it makes no sense. When I leave to go to Trinidad and I can't get in, or I leave to go to Barbados and I'm sent back, or the goods that I produce in Jamaica or the agricultural produce that I export to the region is not accepted, then no matter what we say in here, if the people lose faith in the institutions, that's the end of it. And by 2017, I got the sense that the Jamaican people were losing faith and interest in the regional institutions. It was quite clear to me at that point in time. And we took various measures, including inviting the Prime Minister of Trinidad and putting the commission together to deliver this report to us today. Mr. Speaker, the resolution before us asks us to resolve on 10 items. The first is that the movement towards greater regional integration and cooperation within CARICOM remains relevant, important, and strategic to Jamaica. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that from all the persons who have participated and contributed, and indeed the sense that I get from the Parliament is that we all agree that CARICOM remains relevant, important, and strategic. Mr. Speaker, the second point on which the resolution asks us to resolve is that it is essential for CARICOM to focus primarily on the gains that can be achieved through the single market, in view of the fact that issues related to sovereignty and supranationality continue to play a part in impeding progress towards a single economy. The report, Mr. Speaker, suggests that Jamaica should withdraw from the CSME if we cannot secure a commitment that is measurable, specific, and time-bounded. The Cabinet debated that and agonized over that, and I see the same debate in the House as well, as to whether or not we should withdraw from the CSME. Some people interpret that as withdrawing from CARICOM. Let me just out of an abundance of clarity say that there is no consideration of withdrawing from CARICOM. It is impractical, and because let's look at it carefully, Mr. Speaker. CARICOM is more than a market. We have cooperation with the University of the West Indies. That works very well. Yes, it works very well. You are a product, I am a product. Well, let's make it work now. Let's make it work again. We have cooperation in disaster management, SEDIMA, which, Mr. Speaker, now more than ever, the region needs to cooperate on this matter. The Minister of Health pointed out the cooperation in health. We have cooperation in training and quality control, standards. We have cooperation in tourism, and and in sports. You can't talk about CARICOM without mentioning cricket. As bad as things are, we won. We beat Sri Lanka. So we have cooperation in sports as well. But Mr. Speaker, people in Jamaica may not necessarily recognize how similar we are to the rest of the people in CARICOM. That if you went to Grenada and you traveled through the hills, you would feel like or St. Lucia for that matter, like you are in any of the parishes in Jamaica. If you went to Antigua, Mr. Speaker, the accent isn't so far from the Jamaican accent. Not to mention, of course, and Mali would fit in very well in Guyana. And so would you. But what I'm saying is, Mr. Speaker, is that Jamaica cannot separate itself from the common culture, history, heritage, and indeed our common colonial legacy. So the truth is that we are all similar in a state of development, similar in terms of our aspirations. We have things that join us together that don't really depend on politics and institutions. So there is no contemplation of Jamaica separating itself. But there is a construct, Mr. Speaker, built on the social, cultural, and historic connections, and that is called the market, the free economic space that we are trying to create. Now, markets emerge naturally, Mr. Speaker. People have things that we want, and, people want things that we have. We have to create institutions to make that happen. Very difficult for the CARICOM market, Mr. Speaker, because we are separated by great bodies of water and significant distances. But we don't have, Mr. Speaker, the connection of transportation, which makes markets work well. So connectivity is an issue. So our markets will always face this disadvantage. It's always been very difficult for our markets to work seamlessly. So, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that we have not contemplated in this report, but it's of importance, is how do we invest in the infrastructure to bring our markets closer together for seamless transportation and connectivity. But because we are sovereign states, governments have interests in protecting local markets. So every government would want to, protect their farmers, protect their industries, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But we also recognize that if we could, by some increase in our capacity to be selfish, because that's what it really amounts to, if we were able to look at the resources that are distributed right across the region, and each country would say, let me develop my resource and share with the rest of the region. As is the conversation I had with President Granger of Guyana, who I found to be one of the more progressive thinking of the heads, who suggested that Guyana, which is about 20 times the size of Jamaica, would make its interland available for Jamaicans to come and own and farm. But that was the thinking behind the creation of the market, that Trinidad with oil, Jamaica would produce manufactured goods, and Guyana would do agriculture, and then with what the economists call the focus on the comparative advantages that you have, then you would create natural markets that would work. But the truth is, Mr. Speaker, that's not what has happened. Everybody is trying to protect their own market. So even though we have a common external tariff agreement, the truth is, Mr. Speaker, that even within that, everyone still is trying to protect their markets. And you would know that we have had significant issues. Local producers here, for example, the minister will tell you, when he was a Minister of Industry and Commerce in our previous administration, had to defend Jamaican patties going into, where was it, Trinidad?
Trinidad.
So,
and recently Belize.
And recently Belize, as you mentioned. So, Mr. Speaker, the issue for us, therefore, is how do we make the single market or the common market work? Then there's the other issue, which was brought to the table, I believe in about 1989, of a single economy. Common market and then a single economy. Single economy builds on top of a common market. Because now you want to talk about fiscal policy coordination, monetary policy coordination, things to do with harmonizing policy for capital movement. How do we get all of those things working together? And I've gone 30 minutes already, Mr. Speaker. Oh.
Mr. Speaker, the time being 7:33, beyond the time having passed 7:30, I ask that the House be allowed to sit beyond 7:30 to enable the Prime Minister to complete his presentation.
Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. Prime Minister, proceed.
Thank you for the reminder. I will be very economical with time. So Mr. Speaker, the single economy poses even greater challenges to coordinate and to get done within the time specified by the report produced by former Prime Minister Golding. It would be almost an impossibility now to seek to harmonize economic policy as it relates to, for example, monetary policy within the region or fiscal policy. So we wouldn't want to contemplate that. So what the government has said is that we will seek to get commitments from the various heads for the full and effective implementation of the common market, which are things that we can do within the 5 years to deal with the issues of the common external tariff, the phytosanitary and sanitary standards. Those issues are things we can deal with. We can get the free movement of labor. We can get agreement on services. Those are things we can get within the 5 years, and those will improve the economy. So the strategy of the government, Mr. Speaker, is not to pull out of the common market. We are going to plant our stake in the common market, defend it, and seek to ensure that it is effective and improve it. But, Mr. Speaker, we don't think it is realistic, especially at this time, to pursue a single economy. So I want that to be clearly understood. Right. Right. So we are. So the well, it's an important distinction to be made by virtue of what is written in the report. So I'm happy that it is not an issue on that side. So, Mr. Speaker. So our intention is stated as in 3. All member states must make a clear and definitive commitment to establish the CARICOM single market with a specific time-bound, measurable and verifiable program of action to fulfill all obligations. Now, Mr. Speaker, we agree that there is an implementation deficit. And it would appear to be not just for CARICOM, but it may be a general problem in the Caribbean. We talk a lot, we pontificate a lot, we are good conceptualizers, but when it comes to actually getting things done, I can't tell you, Mr. Speaker, it is as if we have a fear of getting things done. It is as if, I don't know what it is. It is as if we don't have a stack of paper in front of us and we don't put everything through a rigorous kind of bureaucracy that it wasn't done properly, and therefore nothing should get done. So, Mr. Speaker, the proposal to get things implemented by the Secretariat, we accept. We accept that implementation, Mr. Speaker, must be something that we insist upon. And I will use whatever influence is accorded to the chairman of the conference to get members to commit to implementing. It makes no sense that we agree and there is no implementation. Mr. Speaker, I want to go to point number 7 in our resolution, where I think we all agree that greater prominence should be assigned to the role of the private sector, but I want to amend it. It's not just the private sector. We need to give greater prominence to the role of our unions. We have to give greater prominence to the role of civil society and NGOs in supporting the objectives of monitoring the compliance and implementation of the states, the member states of CARICOM. So, Mr. Speaker, I think we agree on that point. Mr. Speaker, point number 8 Jamaica shall require a review of the basis of assessment of the member states' financial contribution to CARICOM and regional institutions, as well as a rationalization of existing bodies. I think that is an important point, that at the meeting of the heads, Jamaica will call for a review of the basis of assessment of our contributions. We will also call for a review of the system of classifying member states into more developed and less developed. So I want to have an explicit agreement in the House, Mr. Speaker, that this is something that Jamaica should do. Mr. Speaker, CARICOM should seek to broaden, this is point 9 now, its economic cooperation with neighboring states, including those which comprise CARIFORUM, and should seek where possible to take advantage of the CARIFORUM construct to negotiate future trade agreements with third parties. Mr. Speaker, just to be clear, CARIFORUM is the CARICOM states plus the Dominican Republic and Cuba. What it means, Mr. Speaker, and it is an important construct for the ACP negotiating mechanism, Europe to negotiate with us. In the context of Brexit, as it has so turned out, that it is now also the negotiating mechanism for Britain to negotiate with Caribbean states. So it is possible to advance our negotiating, unlike what you're saying, member from Western. We can advance our negotiating mechanism while at the same time including non-Caribbean states. And it may make sense, because the truth is, Mr. Speaker, if you look at it, you know, Belize,
Mr. Hilton.
If we were to withdraw from CARICOM, the single market arrangement within CARICOM, that you run the risk, because the EU, the EPA arrangement, is about deepening the integration process. You withdraw from the CSM or the CSME, well, CSME is not in existence, but the CSM, that you unless there is that reach, because the EPF, with Brexit, if Britain is outside of the EU, the EPA is still a separate arrangement, a separate trade arrangement. So the fact that you may have a discussion with Britain, with CARIFORUM, is not the same as Jamaica within the EPA. The EPA still remains outside of that.
Well, remember, this is just for, I mean, I accept your point, but the point that I'm making is that you have a negotiating mechanism with countries that are not a part of CARICOM. Just hypothetically speaking, if Jamaica were not to be a part of the single market, the common market, and decided to come out, then it would negotiate with similar status as let's say the Bahamas, let's say Dominican Republic, let's say Cuba. So it wouldn't, in any way, Jamaica would still have a negotiating mechanism. That's the point I'm saying. But it is not what we are proposing. Right? I just want that to be clear, remember. But having said that, we should all note that countries that are member states of CARICOM are pursuing other regional integration mechanisms all over the place. Belize, for example, Suriname, right? Suriname is in what's the name of that one? UNASUR, right? So it is not, you know, being in CARICOM doesn't mean that you cannot pursue And if you look at the OECS countries, they are pursuing even deeper integration than the other member states. Yes, but they are. So we know Jamaica, as a part of this debate, should also now seek to pursue stronger regional trade deals with the Dominican Republic, with Cuba, who are right beside us. No, we're just making the point. Yes, we're just making the point. Yes, I see you want to go home now. I'm wrap up the papers already. And number 10, that Jamaica will further evaluate its terms of engagement in CARICOM if stated and agreed commitments towards advancing the CSM are not implemented by all member states within the agreed time frame. Mr. Speaker, it's important, and I listened carefully to the leader of the opposition's position, that we shouldn't go to the bargaining table with threats. And I agree, we're not, the nature of our relationship with CARICOM, we should not have to depend on threats. But I don't want this statement to be interpreted as a threat. What it is that Jamaica has to have a pathway towards seeing the realization of its own interests. Our own interest is to see CARICOM work. There's no question about that. It's to see the CSM work. But if it is that it is not the interest of others, then Jamaica could not have unlimited forbearance in this regard. And we have set ourselves a pathway. We want other countries, other member states to respect that pathway, come on board, because at the end of the day, it will be in everyone's benefit. So, Mr. Speaker, the leader of the opposition suggested that a point that we should also agree on is that this report should be placed with EDS at the conference for them to have further deliberation on that. So, Mr. Speaker, without much more debate, I commend the resolution to the House, the points I have enumerated, for the approval of the House.
Prime Minister, I've been advised that you have made 2 amendments. I therefore would have to put the amendments, and then I put the whole resolution.
Mr. Speaker, I think the Prime Minister and I have shared amendments to some he has mentioned, one which he may choose to put, but I could mention, which is that at the very beginning, we propose for consideration of the House an amendment that says, be it resolved at the House of Representatives, be it resolved by the House of Representatives that the Parliament of Jamaica receives with general approval the report of the Commission to review Jamaica's relations with CARICOM and within the CARIFORUM framework, and recommends that it be used by CARICOM to guide a reform process in respect of the CSME and CARICOM institutions. And then be further resolved, as the Prime Minister has indicated, those points 1 to 10, with the amendments that the Prime Minister... At 7, there's an amendment. And yeah, at 7 there is an amendment, and at 4 there is an amendment where the 3 is deleted. In other words, a period of 5 years. No, take out 3. No, take out 3 too. Yeah, the word 3 too. And with that, we...
Prime Minister, you put the amendments
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Leader of the Opposition for raising the first amendment. I did not have the full script, so I'm enjoining what he has said, and I'm putting that as the amendment to the resolution in terms of adding the chapeau to the resolution. So I'm instructed by the Leader of Government Business that I should read it into the record, but it was read already by it was read already. Yes. So remember, we're jointly debating the resolution. So Mr. Speaker, I'm placing the resolution before you as amended.
If there's no objection to the amendment, I put the amendment. Those in favor? Those opposed? The ayes have it. I put the resolution as amended. Those in favor? Those opposed? The amendment approved. The resolution approved.
Mr. Speaker, I request that the item bills brought from the Senate be recommitted.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Bills brought from the Senate.
And
The following is a message from the President of the Senate to the Honorable House of Representatives. I have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 8th day of June 2018, a bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Establishment of an Agency of Government to be known as the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency to investigate and prosecute serious crime and matters related thereto was passed in the Senate with 77 amendments, for which the Honorable Senate desires the concurrence of this Honorable House. I also have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 15th day of June 2018, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Public Procurement Act was passed in the Senate with 3 amendments, for which the Honorable Senate desires the concurrence of this Honorable House. And the amendments to both bills are circulated. Signed, Thomas Tavares, Vincent QC, CDJP, President of the Senate.
Dr. Chuck. Could I make that we can hear you, please?
The Speaker now asks that the Senate amendments to the bill shortly entitled the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency Act 2018 be considered and approved at a later date. Be considered and approved at a later date. At a later date.
Those in favor? Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister Williams.
Mr. Speaker, I now ask that the Senate amendments to the bill shortly entitled the Public Procurement Amendment Act 2018 be considered and approved at a later date.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Mr. Semudo.
I have to wait until him comes. Mr. Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business today. I think it is fair to say that this has been a historic day and a day that reflects a unity of purpose for which we are all very pleased. I want to congratulate the Prime Minister for having brought this matter at this time on a very, very timely basis. And I wish to congratulate the Leader of the Opposition for the support and the team on the other side for their support for this very important measure that has been presented. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I ask that you adjourn this Honourable House until the 26th, next week. What date you think I'm talking about?
Members,
We will be suspending the sitting, Mr. Speaker, until, you know, I will punish this honourable House for the interruption of the member from Northern Clarendon. Now be calm.
order please. Members,
We ask that the House adjourn until the next Tuesday, 26th, when we will hear from the Honourable Minister of Labour and Social Security.
members, before we put the resolution for adjournment, I wish to remind members, and I'm doing so recognizing the presence of the Leader of the Opposition and the Prime Minister, the Leader of Government Business and Leader of Opposition Business, that a program for orientation and training for parliamentarians is set for June the 26th and the 27th, 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Courtyard Marriott Hotel, 1 Park Avenue. Members are required to advise the clerk if they are unable to attend. Order, please. Reservation is made for members, and I am appealing to members to give 2 full hours to the business of the Parliament on the morning before the House meets. And I expect that members will attend from 8:30 to 1 p.m. at Courtyard Marriott, 1 Park Avenue, Kingston. And Tuesday at the same venue at the same time. And Wednesday, same venue at the same time. Let me explain if you don't understand. On Tuesday the 26th and on Wednesday the 27th from 8:30 to 1. And members, please don't let yourself down. The press will be watching us, and this is an important matter. Members are asked to please advise us, and we will publish your advice so that you won't be embarrassed at your constituency. The House is adjourned until the 26th at 2 p.m.